Welcome to The Left Unsaid, where we scrub the grime of bipartisan bullshit off the stovetop, revealing the shine of pure class consciousness beneath. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick McElwee, joined here by two members of my family.
I'm Meg.
And I'm Finn.
And thanks for that intro. It made me feel a little guilty for the state of our stove.
No need for guilt, just organize, Just put these kids to work.
They're going to ask for living wage, the way we've raised them, just to clean the stove,
They do already, I think. Well, you can listen to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Remember, please, if you're enjoying it, tell your friends. We're back from the summer. We're planning to be on a bi-weekly schedule from here on out. And we're recording this on Labor Day, remembering the members of the labor movement that organized and sacrificed so that we could have things like the 5-hour work week. I wish. 5-day work week, 40 hours, no child labor.
Although Labor Day itself, there's a reason why we don't have Labor Day. We don't celebrate it on May 1st like the rest of the world.
Right, because of course May Day celebrates the Haymarket Martyrs, these anarchist labor leaders from the 1880s in Chicago who were agitating for an 8-hour day. They had a peaceful protest. After the protest round up, somebody from the crowd threw a bomb. A bunch of police officers were killed. They returned with random fire, killing a bunch of people in the crowd. But then afterward, there were some labor leaders that were executed, and it's long believed unjustly. So you have this militant remembrance of Haymarket, and that's what May Day is all about. Around the world, they remember the Haymarket affair, but not here. We had to move to Labor Day because that was too socialist inflected.
Mm-hmm.
Not here where it happened. The country where it happened.
Right, the country where it happened.
Yeah, the United States.
And it's also to disconnect our labor movement from global labor movements.
But we remember in any way, it's nice that we have a holiday for labor, as labor has been experiencing just massive decline since 1980. We got to get our labor movement back. Hopefully that will be the case. We've been keeping up on politics this summer. We're sad to say that we're still talking about Gaza and famine in Gaza. Now, official famine, the IPC, which is the intergovernmental body that is like the gold standard of declaring the state of food access all around the world, says that a quarter of the population of Gaza, around 500,000 people, is in famine, and many, many more are on the edge of famine. People starving to death, kids starving to death. The IPC, this very staid body, has a quote in their summary I think it's worth listing. They said, "As this famine is entirely man-made, it can be halted and reversed. The time for debate and hesitation has passed. Starvation is present and is rapidly spreading. There should be no doubt in anyone's mind that an immediate at-scale response is needed." And just after this, Israel had launched their invasion of Gaza City, which is, as we speak, ongoing.
Right.
And Trump's doing very little.
They're, again, passing back and forth ideas about U.S. presence there and Trump casinos and that Trump Gaza AI reel that he put out months ago. It's still front of mind.
And the complete blockade of aid that lasted for 3 months has come to an end. They're allowing some aid in, but just a tiny fraction of what's needed. I'll drop a chart in the show notes that shows this. I mean, there were like 3,000 trucks a week coming into Gaza before the war. And since then, it's been well below half of that at all times. And it's just a tiny fraction of what's needed now.
With miles and miles of trucks lined up at Gaza's border, ready to go, but they can't because of the Israeli government.
I mean, I got to say, as an Irish person, it has so much resonance with the famine in Ireland.
Of course, yeah.
Which we remember as a man-made famine, where Britain could have stopped it, but didn't. But even that wasn't this brutal. They didn't actually cut off all pathways in. It was more a question of they were trying to profit off of selling produce out of Ireland throughout the famine. And the landlords and the other economic elites of Britain just didn't change that. And they just kept shipping food out.
Right.
It wasn't even all that malicious. It was just kind of an act of omission. They just kept profiting and didn't care very much about the starvation. But this is intentional. This is designed. This is part of the plan. So even as all this is going on, there was this article reported by NPR a few days ago. It gives us a kind of a deep dive into what former Biden administration officials are saying now that they're out of power about what was going on during that whole year and a half when Biden was full-throatedly supporting the Israeli assault on Gaza. It's an NPR. It's called "We Didn't Do Enough: How U.S. Policy Failed Palestinians in Gaza." And you can see the staffers in the Biden administration, they're starting to formulate and present their case before the judgment of history, which they're going to be subject to. And like they did back during the Vietnam War, when you had this supposedly enlightened administration under Robert McNamara, who came over from the big corporations where they had learned to process data, and it was going to be the first war based on data, and all this like really grandiose tech talk, the same kind of things that were being sold by like Elon Musk today about how sort of impartial tech is going to solve all of our problems. Well, the elite during the Vietnam War, after that complete debacle, after everyone could see it for the moral crime that it was, after killing millions of people in Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia, what they asked us then to believe was that it was all done in good faith.
Yeah, immediately after the war, they started trying to control the narrative around how U.S. policy itself was inherently wrong and intervention was inherently wrong in Vietnam. We had good intentions. You know, some of our tactics didn't pan out on the ground, but, you know, the good intentions were always there. And then I'll add they did the same thing for Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah, we're always asked to believe the best of intentions. Maybe they make a mistake here or there as they upend these societies. They refuse to allow people to govern themselves.
Massacre hundreds of thousands of people.
But the best of intentions, and that's what I'm seeing on this article where the Biden administration is coming forth and presenting their case. Now, it is clear that there were two camps inside the White House. There was the one camp that was represented at the highest levels, Joe Biden himself, Jake Sullivan, his national security advisor, Brett McGurk, Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State. And that's the view that just wanted to let Israel do whatever they wanted, even though everybody could see that what Israel wanted to do was war crimes, including the crime of genocide.
These are the people that, if history is just, should be tried at The Hague for abetting of genocide.
I saw that Jake Sullivan is starting to walk back a little bit, saying now that we should stop arms shipments to Israel.
Is that right?
Yeah, I was surprised to see that. Too little, too late.
It's possible that he's also being convinced by this other group within the White House and the State Department and USAID and other kinds of organizations in D.C. who did want to compel Israel to respect international law, to protect civilians and not commit war crimes. And they were calling for at least threatening to cut off shipments of arms to Israel. But that maximalist group, man, I mean, so I think what they claim and what they seem to have been doing day to day is to prevent the absolute worst of it. So they'll say, well, we prevented famine, right? You know, even as they supported everything else. They say they were working hard on that.
Giving themselves a pat on the back.
Yeah. I mean, Jake Sullivan, who you were just talking about, has a quote in this article. He says, quote, "I spent as much time and effort on the humanitarian crisis as any other aspect of the war every day."
As any other aspect of the war. I spent as much time on the humanitarian crisis as, you know, giving Israel targets to bomb. Congrats, Jake Sullivan. I'm sure history
There's some
will judge
mental
you kindly.
gymnastics you have to go through to to say that sentence.
And it's just so pathetic. I mean, they really want us to believe that this was their top priority, that their priority wasn't the 2,000-pound bombs they were delivering being dropped in urban areas or the billions of dollars they kept going back to Congress for.
Right.
I mean, here's another quote. They said, "The U.S. was left fighting to get aid in waterline by waterline, truck by truck, crossing by crossing. Dozens of officials from the White House, the Pentagon, the State Department, and USAID were spending hours and hours working the phones and trying to push Israelis to allow in more aid." They were just so helpless and pathetic. I mean, I could just imagine what these meetings were like with the Israeli counterparts. And they would just endlessly sort of bring up and drone on about the humanitarian issues, about getting in more aid, completely pathetically, because month after month after month, nothing was being done. The Israelis knew they didn't really have to do anything. They just had to listen to these pathetic little
They did build
tirades.
that little offshore aid delivery site, the pier that got washed away.
Yeah, it would cost them like over $250 million and lasted, I think, 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. Yeah, they were doing all kinds of shows. I mean, they were doing the airdrops, and the airdrops are just obviously a show and they're dangerous to the people underneath, crushed people drowned trying to get some of these when they floated out to sea.
And keep in mind that the United States government has basically as much power over Israel as they do over a state. I mean, they provide so much. Haaretz estimated a while ago that the U.S. has funded 70% of Israel's genocide. If you cut that off, they can't even if they want to, they couldn't continue their unending genocide and child slaughter. I mean, it's just ridiculous to throw your hands up and say, "Oop, we maybe stopped like one person or two people from being starved, but we couldn't do anything about Israel dropping the 2,000-pound bombs on hospitals that we gave them."
And this is what they want us to believe is like the big difference between the Democrats and the Republicans is this velvet glove that hides the fist that's pummeling Gaza or whoever their next intended victim is. And honestly, they're probably not totally wrong. There wasn't famine under the Democrats. It was a horrific genocide. And I understand why so many people out there couldn't hold their nose and vote for Kamala in the election. I mean, in the end, when I got in the ballot box, I was so angry. But in the end, I did vote for just because of this very slight difference, just as Noam Chomsky's always said, you vote for the lesser of two evils, even if they're both profoundly evil. But it's just so sickening. And it just has to be the case that we built a Democratic Party that gives us a deeper option that isn't just a thin velvet glove over a fist. But the famine's here now under Trump because the MAGA brand is just unapologetically cruel.
Although some of them have recently figured out that there are some Christians who are also being killed. So there are actually some humans there in the eyes of like Tucker Carlson now because they only see Christians as humans and not Muslims. But,
Well, I think a lot of it for them is the America First aspect, that you're spending money on this war over there. And also that Israel has so much influence over our government and our governing institutions. I got to say, Marjorie Taylor Greene, kooky as I find her on so many issues, is expressing opposition to genocide way more articulately than like the vast majority of elected Democrats.
Marjorie Taylor Greene has outflanked Bernie Sanders on this issue. That is insane and should never, ever be allowed to happen. Why are we allowing Marjorie Taylor Greene, of all people, to outflank our left flank in Congress, barring Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and the like?
Yeah. But I do think going back to this article in NPR about the Biden administration officials, this group that is saying that while they didn't want to micromanage Israel's war, as they might put it, while they were pushing for humanitarian aid, they make it very clear that the Israelis had no intention of providing any aid, that were it up to them, they would have maintained the posture that they took immediately after October 7th when they said, not one drop of aid, no food, no fuel, no water. And keep in mind, just to hammer it home, make sure everybody out there knows, Israel controlled every part of the border around Gaza.
And the border around Gaza are huge concrete walls. When they call it an open-air prison, like you cannot enter or leave goods, people, without Israel's permission. And it has been like that for a long time. 18 years now? Is that how long Gaza's been under siege?
Yeah. And when you're the warden of a prison, when you're keeping people in a prison camp, it's your responsibility to feed those people. It's your responsibility to make sure water flows into the pipes to those people. Well, the second group of Biden administration officials that acknowledge that these so-called humanitarian efforts were just totally inadequate, they really tend to lay it at the feet of Joe Biden himself and his so-called special connection to Israel. It's just so clear, and I think we could tell then, but it's being confirmed now, that Biden embraced this maximalist, unachievable war aim of completely eliminating Hamas. If anyone knows anything about counterinsurgency, that's a completely unrealistic military aim. It's bordering on genocidal itself. And we know, of course, that a lot of these high-ranking officials in the Netanyahu government are themselves connected to the settlers, and that the settlers have an ideology of completely cleansing the land of Judea and Samaria, as they call it. And yet this is what Biden embraced. one of the senior officials called it morally bankrupt. And I don't know. I don't know if this group of officials could have gone further. Like, I don't know if they could have done much more. They could have gone public. If they could have loudly resigned. There's going to be volumes and volumes of history written about this.
Well, there was all sorts of stuff going on in the background while this was happening as well, as far as speculation about Biden's mental acuity or lack thereof.
And I think it can be a cover, too. It's convenient that you had a president who was so singularly and personally connected to defending the state of Israel. And I think it also lets all of the pressure groups, all the pro-Israel pressure groups, all of the pro-Israel money in our political system, all the corruption off the hook, if we just see it as only a single bad president. But, I don't doubt a significant fraction of this great evil is just going to be banal in the way that, Hannah Arendt wrote about the banality of evil.
Yeah.
When she was covering the trial of Eichmann, the bureaucrat responsible for the death camps in Germany during World War II. Just people going about their day doing their job. Their boss says, well, we can't threaten to take away military aid, so they do their job the only way they can, even though they know it's completely ineffectual.
And it's important to keep on reminding people as, the Democratic Party base and Americans in general have shifted drastically away from supporting Israel's genocide, that the DNC and Kamala Harris, the DNC was propping up Joe Biden until the very last second. And then when Kamala Harris came, there was zero change in the Gaza policy, even in the campaign, which poll after poll showed was a very unpopular opinion. So there's this whole huge bureaucracy that's deeply complicit in both A, Trump being president, and B, the continuation of Democratic elites' support for Israel.
Yeah, and, there's another aspect to this, which is laundering the Israeli motivations themselves. A lot of the even critical officials in this article are characterizing it as a failure to plan. Right, and we saw a lot of this under Iraq too, when the U.S. government went in.
All right, just a slightly botched job.
Yeah, like here's a quote. One anonymous official says, "In hindsight, I think it's clear that the operations in Gaza were planned. The military operations in Gaza is what he's referring to, or she's referring to. What you didn't have from the very early days was an equally well thought out and robust humanitarian plan to go along with it. It's like, oh, if only the Israelis had better spreadsheets." They were just clumsy.
Well, but then they like shuttered the UNRWA,
UNRWA is a terrorist organization, just like the UN, Amnesty International, World Food Program, B'Tselem.
Yeah, everyone's a terrorist.
And all the journalists in Gaza.
Yeah, it's garbage. It's a garbage argument. I mean, here's the truth. The United States was actively funding this colony, this ethno-state, that's practiced ceaseless ethnic cleansing since 1948. That's occupied Gaza and the West Bank since 1967. That's practiced military-backed apartheid and a slow and steady ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, imposed a 16-year siege on Gaza at this point, imprisoning and killing any Palestinian who was willing to fight it, even those who tried heroically to fight it nonviolently.
Even kids who throw rocks at tanks.
And the Biden administration was funding them, sending weapons, running political cover for them in the United Nations. And all the while, they knew that Israel was intentionally blocking aid. They knew it because they were having meeting after meeting with them in which they ignored their pleas. This denial of aid is only just one aspect of what's been brought to bear on the Palestinians, right? Destruction of almost every building, targeting hospitals, killing healthcare workers, targeting journalists, just a disregard for civilian life. They've made Gaza unlivable. And that was the war that this Biden administration wanted to protect so badly that they were willing to keep on pathetically going through this charade of requesting aid so all those other war crimes could continue. I mean, it's sick. I know. I hate to play this finger-pointing game while the genocide is ongoing, right? This isn't just about our domestic politics. But I do think it's essential conversation because it's a moment now where we've got to root out this moral rot.
Oh, yes, we do.
I think Trump and MAGA have proved it now. Like, we can see they are not messing around. We've got troops in the streets of the capital of Washington, D.C. I mean, it's pretty scary. Like, this is like a tinderbox that could go off.
if this happened in another country, the United States would be so quick to be like, ooh, coup, ooh, they're doing a non-democracy. Look at how bad they are at democracy over there. We probably should invade them and like kill a bunch of people.
Yeah. I mean, at least if it's the right country, you know.
That's true.
Well, if they had like oil or some, minerals that the U.S. was after, then for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, we need a powerful Democratic Party. We need a political vehicle to fight back. And just looking around, I don't see an alternative to the Democratic Party as a means to oppose the Trump movement in like the short to medium term.
There's Iran.
Yeah, there's Iran. I mean, there are encouraging things to say, like, oh, well, that we could. I think it is still a live fight, the Bernie fight, to take over the Democratic Party apparatus.
Although it has to go past Bernie's position on Israel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think Bernie, again, is somebody, and I think it's hard as you get older, like Biden. I mean, if I want to have sympathy for someone like Joe Biden, you form your political opinions earlier in life and you don't update them for what's actually happening. And we know that Bernie spent time in Israel as a young man, and I think always put the kind of socialism he saw, this sort of frontier socialism in this colony, but still to him felt like real socialism in the kibbutz that he was on. I think that holds some kind of privileged place in his political brain, just like Joe Biden feels like the savior of the Jews because he watched some very moving films on it as a young man. He met Golda Meir and all these other sort of very formative experiences. So maybe so part of that is like this generational argument has political weight in part for that reason. But I think it's exciting. We've talked a lot about Zoran, but we have some new picks. I don't think we feel like we're like the first people to pick them, but they're pretty exciting. Finn, who are you looking at politically?
I'm looking at Graham Plattner, who is running for Senate in Maine to replace Republican Suzanne Collins.
I got a clip of Graham if you want me to play it.
Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Graham Plattner. I'm the Marine Corps veteran and oyster farmer running for Senate here in Maine against Susan Collins. My opponent has already been endorsed by AIPAC, an endorsement I will never get, because what is happening right now in Gaza is a genocide.
Yeah, there you go. This guy is, by all accounts, slightly leading in the polls in the Democratic primary.
But isn't he blowing up his own campaign by starting off with his anti-Israel position?
No, it appears that all the libs who were like, you're going to kill your chances of winning. That's why Kamala is not doing it, were incorrect. In fact, 70+% of the Democratic Party now thinks it's a genocide. So what he's saying is not unpopular at all within the Democratic Party, and it's generating a lot of excitement that's, translating into this phenomenal campaign launch for him. And I think that my personal prediction is that he becomes the next Bernie, the left's the next star. That's my prediction.
All right.
I mean, for politicians who want to be successful, I mean, right now, if you ask Democrats in polls, there's a poll that came out that said that 80% of Democrats disapprove of Israeli actions in Gaza and only 7% approve. I mean, politicians look for issues where there's like a 60-40 divide and try to be on the side of 60, especially when that isn't represented by the other candidates in the race. This 80-7 is like a no-brainer. It's no longer acceptable to shill for Israel or to say you're progressive on everything but Palestine. If you're not loudly out there opposing the genocide at this point, you're not a serious small d Democrat. You're not a serious representative of the people. You're a careerist who's sold out.
Slight sidetrack, but for those of us who aren't elected representatives or considering running, we need to be out there locally. It's not okay to just let this sort of very organized local pro-Israel lobby be the only one that has a voice in our schools and in our local communities. We've seen a lot of that here because of Fenn's involvement in organizing in his high school. But I encourage you to kind of keep your eyes and ears open, what's going on in your local community, and get out there, talk to the school board, talk to your heads of school if these kind of things come up, and advocate for Palestinian cause for Palestinian kids in your district, and just stop being quiet about it. Write those letters. They take those things seriously. That's one thing we learned about being in our school district here. They really do care about what community members and parents think. It moves them to action. So even if you think that you don't know too much about it, well, you just write something simple, a letter, show people in your local community who have some form of power over what our children are taught, how they're taught, what kind of art goes up in your community, what kind of art doesn't go up in your community. Just keep your eyes and ears open, and don't be afraid to send those letters. Don't be afraid to call your local representatives and be that voice.
Hear, hear. Anyway, we wanted to bring you people we're pretty excited about. I think they represent a growing crop of candidates across the country willing to speak up on these issues.
Meanwhile, we still have Gavin Newsom attacking Trump for being a socialist, which is really fun.
Wait, tell us more about that for someone who hasn't seen that.
Because Trump bought 10% of NVIDIA, which is not socialist at all because it doesn't have any actual control over NVIDIA.
NVIDIA, the GPU chip maker, huh?
Yeah. Very big company.
They being used to build all these data centers, powering this AI thing.
Mm-hmm. And it's not socialist, if you don't have any control over it. But, why are we taking this opportunity to bash your own left flank? It's not like Republicans go around criticizing black racists who are, their right flank. I do not think that this is in a time of, growing fascism in our country is a great choice by the leaders of the Democratic Party.
But Gavin Newsom's definitely a front runner.
Gavin Newsom
unfortunately
gives me the icks, I have to say. I'll be transparent here. I don't like the guy.
No, I mean, he has some social media person that is kind of funny with imitating Trump's tweets or whatever, but he's just such a cynical politician who hasn't said anything on Israel's genocide, who has cracked down on homeless people in his own state.
That's the part that gives me major icks. He's an ambitious guy. He's clearly an ambitious politician.
Yeah, it looks like he was put together by committee. And those committees come with a lot of money. And I'm sorry, it's coming down to which side are you on? The 1% or the 99%? That's the end of my material. You guys have anything else you want to talk about?
Do we want to just briefly talk about what's going on with Trump sending troops into the Caribbean?
Well, one of the development that we're monitoring here at the Left Unsaid is that Trump has been sending warships into the Caribbean off the shore of Venezuela. And there's been some conflicting reports. The Trump administration is saying this is tied to some kind of counter-narcotic operations, kind of counter-drug operation. Other people are worried that it's gunboat diplomacy of the kind that we've seen from the United States against Latin America off and on for the past couple hundred years, almost. And that could come in two forms, right? It could just be like these boats are sitting off the coast to pressure the president of Venezuela, Maduro, to do certain things the United States wants, or perhaps to resign.
Well, the United States government has taken the position that Maduro is an illegitimate president and has put a bounty on him. So,
yeah, $50 million for his whereabouts, and I think everybody knows where his whereabouts are. They're in Caracas, in the presidential palace of Venezuela.
Call up the CIA and claim your $50 million, everyone.
Yeah, and the United States has these terrible sanctions on Venezuela. It's causing a lot of economic suffering there. There's economic suffering caused by mismanagement by the government as well. And there were recent elections that a lot of people, including the Mexican government of Claudia Sheinbaum and Lula down in Brazil, called it illegitimate. But at the same time, they're not calling for the overthrow of the government because there's a strong position for sovereignty among the Latin American countries that the United States ought to adopt too. On the other hand, the president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, who's a really upstanding leftist guy.
He's an eloquent speaker.
He is. He says he's confident the United States is not about to invade Venezuela, so that gives us some hope.
Patrick, you were pretty involved in what was going down in Venezuela in the early 2000s. Do you want to give people just a little bit, a brief history of Venezuela for those who aren't familiar?
Oh, well, sure. I mean, in the early 2000s, the leader of Venezuela was somebody named Hugo Chavez, who led this People's Socialist Party to power. He'd been an army general who actually attempted a coup against this sort of neoliberal government in Venezuela in the 90s. It was a failed coup, but he became very popular when people thought that he was doing it for the country, for the good of the country at large. And he was elected president of Venezuela in 1998, rather overwhelmingly. Immediately, they brought out the charge that he's being anti-democratic. But what was amazing to watch at the time is that it was actually super democratic, because the Venezuelan constitution allowed there to be a recall vote. If the opposition got enough signatures, they could actually call for a vote to recall the president. And this was the president standing for election, not against an opponent, but just against himself. Yes or no? Do you want him to stay president? And I'm just trying to think how many of our presidents would survive a vote like that. I mean, imagine if it was Trump right now. There's no way he survives that. Like, he survives it if he's up against Kamala Harris, because half the country hates Kamala Harris. Or he's up against Joe Biden. Half the country hates Joe Biden. Maybe he wins that election. But if it's Trump against Trump, yes or no, I think all our presidents are going to lose that vote. But Chavez won it in 2000. And despite that, the United States supported a coup attempt against Chavez in 2004. But it seemed to be bringing massive transformation to Venezuela that was just deeply opposed by the United States. It was very allied with Castro and Cuba. And a sad fact is that Chavez died young from cancer. And since then, there's been a bit of a zombie government that's continued afterward. And the United States has pounced on this, has pounced on some anti-democratic things that Maduro, who's Chavez's successor, has done, and imposed sanctions on the country, exacerbating an economic collapse that was already underway there. And obviously, the thing to do is to allow Venezuelans to figure their own way through their own political troubles rather than imposing something from the outside, because that's gone so well for the United States in the past.
Right.
Well, I think we might wrap it up there. We'll have more to talk about in a couple weeks.
There's always more to talk about. In the meantime, can we wrap it up on a upbeat note, which always brings me a sense of hope, is this Global Sumud Flotilla. There are hundreds of humanitarian activists from all over the world who are on dozens of boats. It's the largest flotilla, a humanitarian aid flotilla, to go to Gaza in the 16 years that they've been doing it. And yeah, there are some big names on there. Greta Thunberg is on there again. Tiago Avila. How do you pronounce the Irish comedian's name? Tig? Is it Tig? Tig Hickey? Tig what?
Don't look at me. I mean, I wasn't born in Ireland. I'm just profiling.
The former mayor of Barcelona, who has a young kid. There are a lot of people on there who have kids now.
And so this flotilla is sailing to Gaza to bring aid. Knowing they'll be intercepted by the Israelis.
Right. And Ben Gvir, everybody's least favorite person in the world, is now calling for them to be for a long-term detention for any humanitarians who are picked up by Israel at sea, and to be held like terrorists. So
I thought this was supposed to be a happy note.
Oh, sorry.
It is happy. It's inspiring.
It is inspiring. It's got me making an art project, a sailing themed little project that I'm going to be using on my platform, which is not huge, but not small either, to bring awareness to this movement. Because really these are people everyday people who are tired of seeing governments just sit back and not do anything. And they're people who are making a decision to act. And that's what, we all have to do to the best of our abilities. We need to all take action. So I encourage you, whoever you are listening, to think about ways that you could take proactive steps towards helping the people of Palestine.
Yeah, this flotilla has been framed as humanity's last stand to try to break the siege. There's supposed to be thousands and thousands of concurrent actions all over the world on the ground to support them and protest for Palestine while the flotilla is sailing. So look out for that near you. Try to join a protest sometime in the coming weeks.
And in the meantime, when you find a chance, come on over to theleftunsaid.net. Sign up for our mailing list so we can stay in touch. If you're able, we'd appreciate a contribution. We're trying to make this podcast sustainable, as well as work on a documentary about what's happening with Palestine in the high schools, K-12 education here in the United States. And as always, we welcome your feedback, ratings, or reviews. And we'll plan to bring you an episode again in 2 weeks.
Bye.
All right, take care, y'all.